As we head towards the easternmost part of Scotland, we reach the shores of Angus, an area named for an ancient Pictish chief and the chiefdom of Circan. Here lies a ruinous abandoned mansion tied to a shocking family tragedy and a legend of brutality that echoes in local memory to this very day. Now standing in ruins, the mansion peeking through the trees before us was once known in Gaelic as "at the end of the hard ridge." Today we explore an abandoned mansion's horrific family tragedy. The earliest owners of the lands it stands upon were the Guthrie clan. The Guthries in 1178 were first listed as royal falconers to King William the Lion. They rose to power when Sir David Guthrie was made sheriff of the county and armor-bearer for King James II. He was later made Lord Treasurer of Scotland in 1461. With his new wealth, David Guthrie reclaimed the family lands lost by his father Alexander, which had included the barony lands that the mansion stands upon. Later in life, he was also made Lord Chief Justice of Scotland and married the daughter of Sir Thomas Mall of Panmure, greatly expanding his lands before dying in 1479. However, the clan's luck was soon to run out when in 1513, David's oldest son, his grandson, 3 of his sons-in-laws, and a nephew were all killed at the Battle of Flodden. More losses followed as the clan was involved in conflicts between Mary Queen of Scots and supporters of her son Charles VI, and the clan chief was later killed fighting Clan Gardyne. The next Guthrie clan chief in 1623 became Bishop of Moray, but his religious views on reforms clashed with the king, and it caused the clan's loss of Spiny Castle. The bishop's son then joined the Marquess of Montrose in the English Civil War, but was captured and beheaded by a primitive guillotine called the Maiden, which remains on display in the Museum of Scotland. He was followed in 1638 by James Guthrie, who supported the Covenanters, and was stripped of his offices, arrested, and executed for it. By 1643, the Guthrie clan lost the barony the mansion stands upon, and today even the seat of Guthrie Castle is no longer owned by a Guthrie clan member. In 1643, a new family took over the lands when the Earl of North Esk bought them. The barony quickly changed hands again in 1684 with the entrance of the Bower family, who would not only build the original mansion house, but were to become tied to its lasting tale of tragedy. The Bowers gained their name from a knight who on the Third Crusade distinguished himself under King Richard I, fighting off an attack of Saracens in 1191. The family arms ever since bear a bow and arrows and the phrase ad metam, or the goal. The Bowers became lairds of the barony under Alexander Bower, who then lost them in 1692 when he was forced to sell to Alexander Graham, who had a bond on the house. However, by 1700, it had returned to his ownership, and on his death in 1734, it was then ruled by his son Alexander Bower, whose story now haunts this house. One day in 1744, Alexander was traveling in Europe when he heard word that Bonnie Prince Charlie would be landing in Scotland. He rushed home from Spain to watch for the landing of the prince. In 1745, when the prince landed, he raised local tenants at the mansion, joining Lord Ogilvy's regiment, where he was made a lieutenant. The regiment fought at Falkirk and Culloden before marching to Ruthven Barracks to stand down, with the war having ended. Alexander then returned home to the mansion with his cousin Colonel Kerr. Alexander's wife and son were already at the house, and in the daytime he would hide in the nearby hills with the colonel, and at night he would return to the house to find food and shelter with his family. King George II had hired Hessian dragoons to scour the countryside, looking for recruits and pillaging the lands. One night, as they came home, they were seen by a patrol. The house was surrounded, and the Hessians began to hamstring the horses, cows, and livestock, while a few men entered the house. Alexander was sitting waiting with his wife, but managed to fight a few off and block the door before jumping through a lower window that had a loose metal bar and fleeing to the hills. Colonel Kerr also tried to escape but was immediately captured and then released as he was in the service of the Spanish. Bower's wife Margaret set out to plead for his life with the Duke of Cumberland, who led the local forces. Eventually, Alexander returned, starving, and was accidentally allowed to sleep till dawn when the house was found again to be surrounded. With no way to escape, he hid inside a secret room, but was betrayed by his valet, who after refusing to give information to the Hessians, was hung from a tree until giving away the hiding place. Bower was found, wounded with a sword, and tied up. He was then dragged for 2 miles by his long hair, which was tied to a horse's tail. until the Hessians met a poor farmer named Saunders Kinnear, who on bended knees pleaded for his master, saying, "If you will only put the gentleman on a horse, I will give you all the silver that I have." The Hessians took the money, and he was taken to Perth prison on horseback the rest of the way. Margaret, in time, reached Stirling to plead with the Duke of Cumberland for his life, and the Duke granted her this on condition that they and their 6-year-old son Alexander would leave the country and never return. However, on her return to Perth, Margaret soon found out that Alexander had just died of his injuries shortly after he reached the prison. Upon seeing his dead body, out of shock and grief, she fell onto the mangled body and also expired. The dead husband and wife were put in a single coffin and taken to the mansion's library, where they sat for days before burial. However, the tragedy was not over for the family. A relative, James Bower, became obsessed with inheriting the property and bribed the Hessians to kill the 6-year-old son Alexander. The child's nurse, Betsy, heard the hoofbeats coming and hid the boy in the coffin with his dead parents. The Hessians, unable to find him, instead slashed the family paintings, papers, and heirlooms and stole what valuables were there. Young Alexander, however, managed to escape with his life. In one last insult upon the family after the burial of the parents, the gravedigger dug up the casket and cut off Margaret's finger in order to steal the very expensive ring he'd buried her with. Some legends say that the corpse cried out, and because of this, a local mob set out and destroyed the grave. Its location is now unknown. As for young Alexander, he escaped that night with the local chaplain, and in time he went to France with an aunt, where he was educated at Scots College in Paris. The aunt Sarah returned to Scotland to raise more funds for his education, and while there she was attacked by robbers and murdered. Eventually, Alexander became a page to King Louis XV, in whose service he caught the smallpox and became disfigured. In time, Alexander was invited to return to Scotland, as a new law had passed allowing young children of Jacobite rebels to inherit their parents' lands. Alexander, upon reaching the house, found the very James Bower who had attempted to have him killed living at the house. A case was opened, and James used Alexander's smallpox and French upbringing to suggest he was an imposter. However, eventually the local mansion's tenants stepped forward to back him up, and his knowledge of the local area and personal details about them sealed the case. James was forced to leave the mansion and give back the estate revenues that he'd kept. In time, Alexander married another Margaret and had 2 children with her. The last Bower to hold the house was a Graham Bower, who inherited in 1796 from Alexander along with great debts, which forced him to sell much of the lands. In 1817, a dishonest friend caused further losses, and the Bower family moved south to Fife, where Graham later died in 1844. In 1818, the Bowers sold the house itself to Robert Graham. Robert decided to build a new country mansion using the old Bower house, enlarging it with the help of architect James Gillespie Graham. The now large square neoclassical mansion had 3 floors, 16 bedrooms, 5 public areas, a billiard and smoking room, as well as 11 servant rooms on the ground floor. There was also a fish pond, dovecote, boathouse, and a large walled garden. And this very house stands today, gray and staring from the woods that now surround it. Since no modern road or track reaches the front, we head towards the back of the old house. Dark windows gape from bays above. Even here it seems there's pointless vandalism, as this door panel has recently been punched out. This small building appears to be some kind of workhouse. The pipe coming from this chamber's ceiling seems to be used to collect ash from above. Old beams are still high above. The wainscoting in many areas remains fully intact, as do the large window shutters. An intact shelf lines the wall. The floor we stand upon would have been the ground floor for servants, while the large room above seems to have been possibly a billiard or common room. Swinging above in the breeze is a matted tangle of plant roots mixed with rotted beams and boards. A huge room filled with a tangle of trees and fallen boards. Above on the second floor wall is a metal door that some believe to be the very trap door leading to a small room Alexander hid in before he was discovered by the Hessians. The iron grates are still on the windows, the fake bar through which Colonel Kerr squeezed through before his capture. The servants' hallway through this window is mostly intact. To the right is a hole dropping into the basement. A bird skull lies on the ground. This thick double door has a strange mechanism on either side. If any of you have any ideas as to what this may have been, please let me know in the comments. A riveted metal rectangular box lies in this collapsed corridor. Inside the main stone stairwell, I point out the fact that the brick wall supporting the stairs above it is held up by just a single loose brick. On the top of the first flight, there's a short hallway with a closet. Back on the hallway, a row of servants' bells hangs on the wall. These would have been marked for each room, and using wires would have rung to summon servants. In this small caved-in room is a dark, half-block doorway. A piece of slate and a channel below it carved with the pattern of a sun is a complete mystery. Above can be seen a few plaster wall alcoves. In this room, large metal beams have plunged from high up like spears. A piece of original plaster relief lies on the ground. series of large open rooms is on this end, seemingly much more new later additions from the 1800s that did not last the test of time. On a far wall are traces of the old wallpaper. Gaping holes make these walls unlikely to last much longer. Going back outside and turning right, it's clear the sturdier, stone-built portions of the mansion in the back must be the older house of the Bowers. So how did the house end in these ruins, and what became of its owners? After only a few decades, the mansion switched hands from the Graham family, becoming the home of Sir David Baxter, 1st Baronet in the 1840s, who was a manufacturer of jute at Baxter Brothers, which was the first powered mill in Dundee. Hero Park is still named for the family, and the University of Dundee, founded by his sister Mary Ann, still operates. After moving in, Sir David renovated the house in the 1880s before dying there in 1872. Upon his widow's death in 1882, the house and some 1,200 acres went to William Edward Baxter, a long-standing member of Parliament for Montrose and financial secretary to the Treasury. He retired in 1885, dying shortly after in 1890. From here, his son Edward Baxter, a justice of the peace, who also ran a number of local mills for flax and yarn, inherited the mansion. William Edward's other son, Sir George, went on in 1908 to run for election in Dundee as a Liberal Unionist and was defeated by the not yet famous Winston Churchill. Sir George was later president of University College in Dundee. Edward's son John was at the time fighting on the side of the Boers in South Africa against the English and lost his way while on patrol. A local shepherd heard his British accent and guided him to the English soldiers, who he mistook due to poor vision and similar uniforms as fellow Boers. He was quickly found guilty by a military court and shot in a firing line. Following the death of his son, Edward died heirless in 1933. His widow Isabel afterwards lived at the mansion, dying at the age of 81 in 1943. The house was then sold just after the Second World War to a local farming family on the strange condition that it was never to be lived in again. Sometime after the sale of the house and its estate, the lead was stolen from the roof by thieves, and the family then removed the roof entirely. As for the young Bower children who had grown up at the house and later moved on, James Bower would become an admiral, and his own son would in time become General Hamilton Bower, who undertook secretly mapping Tibet, which was then a hermit kingdom that did not accept foreign visitors. For this, General Bower was awarded the Royal Geographical Society's Founders Medal for being the first Englishman to have crossed the Tibetan Plateau. General Bower wrote his memoirs in a diary of a journey across Tibet. There's one part left we still have yet to show you, and to see it you have to go out and around the side of the house. It's completely overgrown and almost invisible. The pillared entrance with its grand stair is almost a part of nature. Each column is mixed with each tree, and the large steps are now almost hidden under the dirt and crumbling leaves. Before we say goodbye to this forgotten place, I'd like to share a surprise discovery I made. When researching the mansion's lost past, I found the house had a song written about it long ago, which was taken down in a single source in 1802. Unable to find any recording having ever been made of it, I was able to reproduce it myself. I think it's a perfect haunting swan song to a lost house and its enduring tale of tragedy. Join us next time as we explore an abandoned Irish castle. Thank you for watching. For more unique abandoned places and their lost stories, follow us today by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. Until next time.